Some say it doesn't exist, a madman's dream, a cartographer's error, a lie whispered too close to truth. And yet, in the haunted silence beyond the galactic rim, where no stars shine and the warp howls like a wounded god, something watches. Not a weapon, not a fleet. A world untouched by history's decay, shielded by time, hidden not just from enemies, but from allies, from records, from memory itself. They call it the Second Terra, a mirror of humanity's cradle, crafted in dread secrecy, meant to outlive the Imperium itself should Holy Terra fall. No one can prove it. No one dares seek it. But in the eyes of dying navigators and in the ramblings of long-dead psychers, the name endures like a splinter in reality. Second Terra, the throne behind the throne. When the Imperium was forged in the fires of old night and bound together by the iron will of the Emperor, its foundations were laid with 1,000 contingencies, each as ruthless and unfathomable as the wars that birthed it. Among the endless plans etched into the golden walls of Imperial command was one truth the Emperor understood more deeply than any of his followers. Nothing lasts forever, not even Terra, not even him. It might seem sacrilegious to think that the Imperium of Man, with all its titanic weight and spiritual authority, would dare plan for the loss of its heart. But that is precisely why a backup was necessary. The heresy taught that no world, no institution, no belief, however sacred, is immune to betrayal and ruin. When Horus drove his blade into the fabric of the galaxy, what cracked wasn't just the surface of Mars or the sky above Terra. It was the assumption that loyalty was permanent, that power was invincible, that the center would always hold. From that moment on, the necessity for a Second Terra was not just prudent, it was vital. This was not about simple redundancy. It was not a matter of logistics or strategic fallback. It was about legacy, ideology. If Terra burned, the dream of mankind would have to endure, somewhere, somehow. And for that, something more than an ark or archive would be needed. A mirror to Terra's glory, a sovereign node capable of ruling the stars if the Emperor's throne should ever fall silent. Such a notion wouldn't be filed under standard protocol. It would be whispered into existence, perhaps by the Emperor himself, then buried under layers of denial and lies so deep that not even the Inquisition could uncover them. But what would drive such a vision? Consider the psychology of the Imperium's architects, the Emperor, perpetually burdened by foresight, Malcador, master of contingency. Even Dorn, for all his stoic rigidity, once planned the Phalanx as a mobile fortress world in case Terra itself fell. These were not men who believed in permanence. They believed in control, and true control demands redundancy. The warp storms of the Age of Strife had taught humanity that even the greatest lights could flicker. And once the Astronomicon was lit, it became the single point of dependence for the Imperium. To lose Terra would be to lose the beacon, the throne, the psychic gravity that held 1,000,000 worlds in place. Unless that beacon could be rebuilt elsewhere. There's an eerie logic to the backup throne world. The ecclesiarchy and the High Lords would never sanction its creation in the open. The Imperium is too anchored in symbolism, in ritual, in the mythic gravity of Earth. But the Mechanicum, the Emperor's most secret servants, they could be convinced, or perhaps they were ordered, not to build another empire, not to supplant the original, but to build a failsafe so deep, so unreachable, that it could never be used, unless all was lost. This was not a place for mortals, it was a crucible for eternity. If Terra was ever lost, to warp, to Xenos, to time, the Second Terra would activate. A command protocol buried in golden code, a clone of the Astronomicon lit by synthetic psychers or hidden shards of the Emperor's own psychic residue. Entire institutions pre-built and coded into waiting servitors. Gene labs ready to birth a new council. Perhaps even a throne, not for worship, but for function. A thing of grim purpose. It's not hard to imagine this world being seeded before the Great Crusade ever ended, or perhaps during the heresy itself. Perhaps it was Malcador's final act before the psychic blast of Terra's siege consumed him. A quiet whisper to a forgotten forge world, a map handed to no one, its route carved only into psychic dream space. A gesture of infinite paranoia, or infinite hope. The grim truth is this: every galactic empire that ever dreamed itself eternal eventually faced collapse. What makes the Imperium different is that it doesn't just fear the end, it prepares for it. Every contingency, every exile protocol, every silence order encoded into the Mechanicum's darkest cores all point to a truth no one dares voice in the High Lord's chambers. Terra can fall, and if it does, there must be something else, and perhaps it already exists. Cold, waiting, hidden in the dark, not a rebellion, not a betrayal, but a mirror forged in the same fire, locked away until needed. Not even the Emperor could trust mankind not to fail, but perhaps he trusted that he might give them one more chance, one last ember buried in the ashes of a dead galaxy. The Second Terra. Not an alternative, a resurrection. The Halo Zone is unlike any other region in the galaxy. It lies beyond the edge of mapped space, beyond the outer reaches of Imperial dominion, where even the long-range augurs of the Adeptus Mechanicus shudder with static and silence. It is a place that, in many ways, defies existence, a realm without stars, without stable gravity wells, without any of the celestial signposts that guide navigators through the warp. Just the void, a pure and endless absence, and it is here, in this absence, that the myth of the Second Terra takes on its most chilling dimension. The galaxy is a crowded tomb. Every inch of known space is saturated with war, with the footprints of Xenos, with the broken remnants of the long night. But the Halo Zone is empty in a way that is not natural. It is not merely unexplored, it is avoided. Void ships that veer too close report malfunctioning systems, lost time, and psychic sickness. Astropaths go blind or mad, and yet, every few centuries, someone returns with tales of a cold beacon in the black, a signal that pulses with logic and menace, encoded in an archaic Terran dialect long thought extinct. Why would such a place be chosen to hide a throne world? The answer lies in its very nature. The Halo Zone's starless depths are not just isolation, they are erasure. To place something there is to remove it from reality, to sever it from the warp-laced lattice of the galaxy. There are no reliable warp lanes in that region, no charted systems. The warp itself recoils from the Halo Zone like flesh from a blade. The theories vary. Some claim that an ancient race sterilized this region of space in a war beyond reckoning. Others say that the Emperor himself imposed silence here, binding demonic tides with psychic chains, turning the region into a kind of null space. Whatever the origin, the result is the same, a region immune to casual discovery. Any world built here would be invisible to sensors, unreachable by standard warp travel, undetectable by psychic scrying. It is the one place in the galaxy where even the ruinous powers would hesitate to look, not because they cannot find it, but because they cannot feel it. The warp hates the Halo Zone, and in a galaxy where warp travel is the bloodstream of civilization, that hatred is more effective than any fortress wall. For a throne world designed to be forgotten, this is perfect. The most dangerous knowledge is that which can be remembered. To bury a Second Terra, not behind force fields or fleets, but behind metaphysical silence, is the work of a god, or of men trying desperately to imitate one. But there's more. Some accounts, often found in the ramblings of derelict Vox recordings or the scratched hull etchings of rogue explorators, speak of impossible architecture floating in this starless deep, structures that appear and vanish, blacker than space, silent and unmoving. Entire continents of alloy and stone, orbiting nothing. These could be fragments of dead worlds, or they could be test beds, the bones of a planetary system engineered from the void up. Because if the Second Terra exists, it could not have been founded on a natural world. There are no stars here, no habitable planets. Everything would have to be built. A sunless system created through technologies older than the Imperium, older even than the Dark Age of technology. And who better to do that than the Mechanicum? Or perhaps something stranger, some proto-AI or autonomous construct left behind by the Emperor's earliest experiments. And what of time? The Halo Zone's strange warp profile suggests a temporal instability. Ships report arriving decades before they left, or never arriving at all. A world placed here might exist in an altered time flow, frozen between moments, untouched by the entropy of the galaxy. For a backup throne world, what better sanctuary than a region that does not just resist entry, but resists time itself? There's a theory whispered among certain black ships that the Second Terra isn't just hidden, it's paused, suspended, that if Terra fell, certain trigger events, encoded psychic messages perhaps, would awaken it, and only then would it return to time and space, shedding its cloak and re-entering the galaxy like a reborn god. Until then, it drifts. Maybe it dreams, maybe it waits, or maybe it does nothing at all, simply locked in the eternal stillness of the Halo Zone's dark. A silence deeper than death. A silence chosen, not by accident, but by design. Because if you were to build a new cradle for mankind, you wouldn't hide it behind defenses. You'd bury it in the one place no living thing would dare to look. The end of everything. To construct a world in the darkness, without a star to nourish it, is not merely a feat of engineering. It is an act of defiance against the very principles of existence. In the Second Terra hypothesis, nothing is more audacious than the idea that the Imperium, or something far older, terraformed a dead system adrift in the Halo Zone's blackness. No sun, no orbit, no natural warmth or light. And yet, perhaps, a thriving biosphere built on forbidden science, dead technologies, and warp-bending miracles. The concept begins with necessity. No natural system in the Halo Zone would suffice. The absence of stellar activity renders the usual process of colonization meaningless. So the architects of the Second Terra would have had to construct a false system from the ground up. Planets, moons, stations, all brought from somewhere else or synthesized using elemental harvesters from the interstellar medium. The core of the operation would be the artificial sun, if it can even be called that. Imagine a singular construct, a sphere of directed plasma, self-sustaining and suspended by gravitic anchors, perhaps drawn from the last embers of a dying star consumed and folded into itself. Not a true sun, but a contained fusion reactor scaled to planetary levels. Its light and heat controlled, regulated, perhaps even shielded so as to prevent detection. A hidden sun for a hidden world, masked behind radiation screens and sensor null fields. It might not even emit light in the visible spectrum. To an outside observer, the system would still appear empty. But to those within, it would burn with a cold, calculated radiance. Terraforming would follow. Here, the Mechanicum's oldest and most sacred machines come into play. Atmospheric generators, ecosystem seeding units, orbital grav manipulators. Entire weather patterns sculpted in algorithmic cycles, oceans poured from artificial aquifers, flora and fauna designed not by evolution but by code and purpose. The soil itself may be printed matter, a nanite-infused substrate teeming with artificial microbes, all designed to mimic Terra's biological profile. And the core world, the Second Terra itself, would not be like Mars or Luna or any of the great Forge worlds. It would not be metal and machinery. It would be alive, green, blue, Earth-like, a mirror not just of Terra's function but of its soul. Forests encoded to grow in synchronization with the artificial day-night cycle. Mountains carved to echo the Himalaysian peaks. Rivers patterned after the Tigris and the Amazon, not for sentiment, for continuity, For the myth of mankind to endure without fracture, the Mechanicum would not be alone in this labor. There would be psychers, perhaps artificially stabilized ones, or even cloned blanks used as a psychic firewall. Their job would be to suppress warp anomalies in the region, keep the veil between realms as stable as possible. Perhaps an early prototype of the black ships, not for hunting witches, but for suppressing demons before they could gestate in the silence. Because the Halo Zone's quiet is not peace, it is absence. And in such places the warp's hunger grows fangs. The throne structure itself, not the Golden Throne, but a replica, a backup command nexus, would be at the world's heart. Not a throne in the ceremonial sense, but a device, a generator, a regulator of psychic signals. Something designed to echo the Astronomicon in miniature, or to at least channel emergency warp beacons if the primary one on Terra was extinguished. This machine, likely hidden deep within the planet's crust or floating in orbital silence above it, would represent the soul of the Second Terra, a failsafe for civilization itself. Everything would be automated. Cities without people, bureaucracies without citizens, machines waiting for commands that would never come unless Terra itself was lost. Dormant networks, archived data vaults, entire gene seed vaults preserved at sub-zero stasis. Not for colonization, for resurrection. This world would not evolve or grow or adapt. It would remain exactly as it was the day it was sealed. Untouched, perfect, a frozen heartbeat in the galaxy's deadest zone. But what if someone did live there? What if a select few were chosen to inhabit it, maintain it, guard it? Perhaps a cloned populace designed to mimic ancient Terran cultures. Perhaps descendants of the original Mechanicum engineers, now living in ritualistic silence, unaware of the true purpose of their world. Perhaps children bred to be savants, scholars, and guards, all awaiting a signal that may never come. A society asleep in motion, bound by encoded purpose, every life a cog in the mechanism of rebirth. No world could be built like this today. The Imperium has lost too much. The Mechanicus worships their machines without understanding them. The blueprints for such a creation would be heresy now, or legend. But if it was done once, long ago, during that fragile moment when the Emperor still walked, it might still endure. Out there, in the black, a terraformed world without a sun, hidden in the shadows of the stars, carrying within it the blueprint of mankind's second chance. And that world waits, silently, unchanging, a myth wrapped in void. The Second Terra, not just a fortress, not just a sanctuary, a message that even in the face of total collapse, humanity planned to begin again. What kind of minds were chosen to dwell in absolute silence, to guard a world that was never meant to be found, never meant to be needed? If the Second Terra exists, then it stands to reason that someone must watch over it. But this is not a duty given to mere soldiers, nor even the revered space marines. It is a role that demands more than loyalty. It demands perfection, incorruptibility, and a will unbreakable by time or despair. In the Imperium, only one group fits such a description, the Adeptus Custodes. Yet it is almost blasphemous to imagine any custodian leaving Terra. Their entire purpose is bound to the Emperor's presence. They are the guardians of his throne, his chambers, his silence. For them to depart would require a command of the highest and most sacred authority, perhaps issued during the heresy itself, or even earlier, during the earliest years of the Great Crusade, when the Emperor still moved among men and built plans with the precision of a galaxy-spanning god. Imagine a detachment not of warriors, but of watchers. Custodians selected not for their prowess in battle alone, but for their capacity for secrecy, their philosophical detachment, their ability to endure eternity. These would not be the golden giants who stride through the palace with blazing spears and proud banners. These would be the forgotten ones, stripped of name and heraldry, given no glory, no recognition. Their armor dulled, their oaths unrecorded. They would vanish from the ranks and be remembered only as shadows in the archives. Lost during the siege, perhaps. Killed in the webway, some might guess. But they would be neither dead nor gone. They would be en route to the void. Custodians in the Halo Zone. The very thought is unsettling. Not because they could not survive there, but because they could. Perfect bodies, genetically unaging, immune to corruption. Minds honed not just for war, but for philosophy, meditation, solitude. Each one a self-contained fortress, armed not merely with weapons, but with knowledge and will. If such a force guards the Second Terra, they do so not with parades or public worship, but with a silence as profound and deliberate as the void around them. Perhaps they live in orbit, aboard a station forever watching the constructed planet below. Or perhaps they walk its streets, disguised among its possible inhabitants, never speaking their true names. Their role would not be merely to defend. There is no invasion force that could even reach this place. Their purpose would be more existential, to ensure the protocols remain intact, to prevent internal decay, ideological drift, or madness, to maintain the purity of the world's purpose. One can imagine them meeting every 1,000 years in a chamber beneath the artificial sun, reciting ancient codes, confirming the stability of the systems, checking the planetary seal states. Rituals of silence, meditations upon fate, warriors whose only battle is against entropy and memory. And yet, they are not gods. They were made to protect the Emperor, and here they are, cut off from him, their purpose suspended. What does that do to a being of such immense internal force? Do they dream of Terra? Do they wonder if he still lives? Do they yearn to return? Or have they convinced themselves that their exile is divine? That in guarding the Second Terra, they guard the very future of humanity? There are darker theories, too. Whispers in certain Ordo Chronos circles speak of custodians so altered by their role that they no longer consider Terra the true throne. That the silence and isolation have bred in them a new vision, not heretical, perhaps, but alien in scope. They speak in glyphs now, not words. They write philosophy that no one reads. They have created their own miniature empire of contemplation, a priesthood of golden ghosts. What if they have changed the world they guard? Not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. Perhaps they have added to it, built new chambers, new statues, new codes, not just preserving the Second Terra, but evolving it, preparing it not just for the fall of the First Terra, but for the rebirth of mankind in a different form, a form they will oversee. Or perhaps they are dead. Perhaps they succeeded in building the world, sealed it, and entombed themselves in crypts of stasis beneath its surface, waiting for a signal that has never come. Custodians frozen not in fear, but in patience, locked in golden sleep beneath artificial mountains, dreaming of the Emperor's return. Either way, the notion changes everything. The custodians are the last line. If even one of them guards this mythic place, then it is not just real, it is sanctioned. And that is the most terrifying possibility of all. Because if the Emperor himself ordered such a thing, then he truly believed Terra might fall. And worse, he believed something else must endure in its place. Something sacred, something secret, something watched forever by the last true guardians of mankind. Beneath the synthetic sky of the Second Terra, behind vaults encoded with seals of psychic resonance and logic-defying script, lie treasures not of wealth, but of meaning. If such a world was built to carry the Imperium's soul forward through catastrophe, then what would it need to preserve beyond the flesh and steel of civilization? Knowledge, memory, power, and among these, perhaps the most precious and dangerous of all, the psychic and informational artifacts stored in the Golden Libraries and the Psychona Vaults. To understand the necessity of such repositories, one must first understand what is truly at stake. The Imperium is not held together by laws or armies alone. It is maintained by belief, memory, and psychic infrastructure. The Astronomicon, the Emperor's aura, the historical narrative of mankind's divinity. Should Terra fall, all of that collapses into chaos unless it has been preserved in parallel. The Golden Libraries, then, would be more than archives. They would be engineered spaces of memory, vast chambers encoded with the entire mytho-political structure of the Imperium. Not merely texts, but living records, hololiths of council sessions, memory implants of strategic doctrines, preserved cortical engrams of Imperial saints. Knowledge encoded into crystal, ferrocortex, and gene seed vaults. A complete mind map of the Imperium at its zenith, curated for eventual resurrection. Some say that Malkador, the Emperor's shadow, saw the fall coming long before Horus ever turned. He may have arranged for psychic copies of critical events, even portions of his own mind, to be stored in these libraries. Imagine, then, a future in which a young psyker walks the halls of the Second Terra and encounters a ghost, not a demon, but a recorded shard of Malkador's intellect, preserved to guide humanity's next awakening. These would not be simple AI or machine spirits. They would be soul echoes, woven into the fabric of the vaults like memory into flesh. Adjacent to this intellectual sanctum would be the Psychona vaults, structures not for containing psychers, but for housing psychic phenomena and instruments of impossible delicacy. Here, the Imperium's backup link to the warp might slumber. A miniature astronomicon, perhaps, not fueled by billions of psychers as the one on Terra is, but stabilized by alien technologies and augmented by controlled warp gates. Or worse, a clone spark of the Emperor's psychic essence, bound into an artifact barely awake, waiting for activation. It is said in the most forbidden Ordo Psychona scrolls that a project once existed, long before the heresy, to create a relay of psychic nodes capable of mimicking the Astronomicon. It was abandoned, or so they say. But what if it was completed, and only used once, tested and then sealed, because it worked too well? Such a device could serve as the soul light of a second Imperium, centered on a new Terra. And then there are the cloning chambers. Heresy, undoubtedly, but heresy of the most seductive kind. If the Second Terra was truly meant as a contingency, would it not include a mechanism for rebirth? A gene vault containing samples of the Emperor's flesh, of Malkador, of the Primarchs? A memory core with personality imprints and neural schematics? Not to recreate them entirely, perhaps, but to create echoes, strategic minds, psychic beacons, figureheads, shadows of greatness to shepherd a broken race. Imagine Guilliman, reborn not through chance and stasis, but through design, rising from the vaults of the Second Terra with a mind half his own and half a stored memory record from 10,000 years before. Or a silent twin of the Emperor, grown in total secrecy, possessing no soul but wielding immense psychic potential, meant only to sit upon the backup throne and light the beacon if all else failed. There would be darker things too. Fail-safes, psychic weapons too dangerous for the Materium. Entire demonic countermeasures encoded into prayer engines. Psi-reactive constructs designed to repel warp invasions. These vaults would not be benign. They would be traps for the future. Weapons sheathed in mystery, waiting for a time of utter desperation. No light of the Second Terra would be unguarded by faith, though not in the ecclesiarchy's sense. The people, or machines, maintaining these vaults would adhere to a cult of memory, a belief not in gods but in preservation. Their rituals would be ones of calibration, psychic tuning, and harmonic resonance. To them, truth would be sacred. Forgetting would be the only sin. In these silent halls, mankind's soul would be held in stasis, not as a myth, but as data, emotionally encoded, architecturally preserved, waiting not just for the fall of Terra, but for the rise of something new, something truer, a civilization that remembers not just what it is, but what it was meant to become. These libraries and vaults are not insurance. They are destiny waiting in the dark. It is a strange thing, the silence that surrounds the Second Terra, not just the quiet of deep space, but a deliberate, enforced absence from memory, record, and soul. If this world truly exists, then we must reckon with the single most terrifying act ever taken by the Imperium. It chose to forget, not through neglect, not by time's decay, but through intention. This is the Silence Protocol, a theoretical mechanism so absolute, so ruthless, that it would make exterminatus look like mercy. The Imperium is built on control of information. What cannot be killed is contained. What cannot be contained is erased. But what cannot be known, that is the greatest weapon of all. The Silence Protocol, as it is whispered of in forbidden Mechanicus lore and obscure inquisitorial documents, is the ultimate cloaking measure. Not a void shield, not a warp shroud, but a deletion of existence from all levels of perception. It is the doctrine of perfect absence. If the Second Terra was created, if it was ever given coordinates, maps, rituals, names, then all of these would have been cleansed through the Silence Protocol. Every cartographer involved, every tech priest who ran the calculations, every servitor who carried messages would have been systematically removed, brain-wiped, or reprocessed. Not killed, necessarily. Killing leaves records. They would be reassigned, rewritten, their memories overwritten with new narratives. Some might now serve in high imperial offices with no recollection of what they helped build. Others could be part of the very institutions tasked with suppressing knowledge of the place they once knew intimately. But information is never truly gone, and in a galaxy so saturated with psychic resonance, forgetting becomes a war not just of mind, but of soul. So the Silence Protocol would have had to go deeper. Psychic null fields surrounding the world and all its data relays. Encrypted cogitator languages designed to self-destruct when accessed incorrectly. Perhaps even collective mind wipes, targeted warp events that washed over entire sectors, removing awareness itself. The Ordo Redactus, if it exists, would have been employed in full, not merely censoring documents, but retroactively editing history, changing timelines, resequencing imperial calendars to eliminate anomalies. Such actions are not without cost. When you erase the memory of an entire world, you create fractures, inconsistencies, astronomical charts with missing entries, ship logs that jump without cause, veterans who recall campaigns in empty sectors. And so the Silence Protocol includes suppression as well. Myths derided, dreams mocked, prophecies reclassified as delusions. Those who speak of a Second Terra are labeled heretics, madmen, or conspiracy theorists, their words dismissed or buried under more pressing horrors. And yet, the Imperium cannot entirely control the warp. The deeper layers of reality resist erasure. Astropaths dream of cities beneath black suns. Navigators draw star maps they don't remember learning. Children on Hive World sketch towers they've never seen. Something echoes, faint, yes, but persistent. And so the Silence Protocol is ongoing, eternal. Every few generations, the Ordo Hereticus burns another book, silences another prophet, deems another sector irrelevant. Because if they don't, the silence might break. And once broken, it cannot be restored. But why such extreme measures? The simplest answer is that the Second Terra must not be used unless the first falls. Not out of pride, out of design. To activate it prematurely would create schism, rebellion, a competing source of legitimacy. Imagine if an entire throne world, complete with its own astronomicon, its own archives, its own sovereign infrastructure, were found to exist. The High Lords of Terra would be undermined in an instant. The ecclesiarchy would implode. The Imperium, already fracturing, would crack in half. So the Silence Protocol does more than hide. It preserves unity through omission. It ensures that the Second Terra remains a myth, not a rallying point. A ghost, not a flag. Its power lies in being forgotten, because in a galaxy of zealotry, memory is revolution. There's one final layer too disturbing for most to consider. What if the Silence Protocol also applies to the Second Terra's inhabitants? If people live there, guardians, curators, engineers, do they know where they are? Do they remember? Or have they been raised in curated ignorance, taught a false history, living out assigned roles inside a forgotten ark, unaware they are the last hope of mankind? Perhaps even now, a boy studies theology in a marble academy, learning myths of the emperor from fabricated scrolls. He thinks he lives on a minor world in the Segmentum Obscurus. He doesn't know that his planet has no sun, no neighbors, no history, that he walks on the Second Terra, that he is part of a lie so vast it spans the stars, a lie designed not to deceive, but to save. The Silence Protocol is more than a cloaking device. It is a knife at the throat of history, held there by trembling hands. And if that grip ever slips, the blood it spills could wash away everything. In the uncharted vastness of the Halo Zone, where no light dwells and no signal thrives, the Imperium's deepest truths refuse to stay buried. There, at the outermost edge of galactic sanity, stories begin to leak, not through official channels, but through dreams, murmurs, hallucinations. Whispers, not of places, but of emotions, yearnings. The warp, that ever-hungry ocean of soul and madness, does not forget what reality tries to bury. And so, through it, myths of the Second Terra bleed into the minds of the receptive and the damned. Navigators, those strange human mutants born to peer into the warp's tides, report odd phenomena when charting the Halo Zone. Compass stars vanish, the currents fall silent. And some speak of a pull, not a gravitational one, but psychic. A sensation of being watched, of being remembered. A presence vast and melancholy, as though the warp itself recognizes a place that no longer remembers its own name. They call it the Shadow Beacon. A flicker of light seen in no spectrum, perceived only in the deepest meditations, as though something on the other side of perception is calling out, softly, persistently, mournfully. Astropaths, too, have felt it. Flashes in the soul, static dreams, a face made of stars, a voice speaking in no tongue but etched into memory all the same. Some wake weeping, others forget everything for hours or days, and some, in the last seconds before their minds unravel, whisper a phrase that causes inquisitors to freeze mid-breath. The mirror throne has not cracked. They do not know what they're saying. They do not know what it means. But the words recur across centuries, across sectors, across lives unconnected in every way save one, proximity to the edge of nothing. Folklore has begun to spread among void-farers and hive gangs alike, tales told in hushed tones over recycled air and blood wine. They speak of a dead light at the edge of the stars, of an emperor who split his soul to hide half in the dark, of a throne that weeps in dreams. A song, they say, can sometimes be heard through malfunctioning vox units. A lullaby in high Gothic, distorted by time, calling not to the living, but to the forgotten. The Mechanicus pretends not to hear these tales, but their obsession with pattern and anomaly betrays their interest. Some Forge worlds have secretly catalogued the recurrence of dream symbols associated with the Second Terra hypothesis, glyphs of dual-headed thrones, eyes weeping fire, golden cities beneath dark suns. One data priest even claimed to have reconstructed a psychic map of the Halo Zone based entirely on the dreams of psychers, and at its center was a void in the shape of a world. Worse still are the incidents. Ships that vanish without trace, only to return decades later with no crew but a single emaciated astropath. Psychic relays that flicker with transmissions from no known language, translatable only through ancient Terran dialects long declared extinct. Once, a derelict was recovered with a single engraving on its inner hull. Terra Secunda Viget. The Second Terra lives. The ship's log showed no sign of how the message got there. It had been drifting for 200 years. There's a madness to it, a haunting consistency. Too many unrelated souls sharing dreams of cities that never were. Too many whispers of thrones behind thrones. The warp, ever sensitive to emotion and memory, doesn't invent these myths. It reflects, amplifies, echoes. And for it to echo something so specific, so structured, It suggests that the Second Terra isn't just possible, it is real, hidden, and psychically active. The ecclesiarchy has no answer. It burns the prophets, silences the dreamers, but even they cannot deny the patterns. Some rogue confessors claim the Emperor's true soul has been split, that what remains on Terra is merely a husk, and that his awakening awaits not on Holy Earth, but on a world forgotten by time and protected by design. Heresy, they say, but their eyes say otherwise. It is in these myths, in these warp-born whispers, that the Second Terra breathes. Not in maps or chronicles, but in the haunted consciousness of those who've brushed too close to its memory. The warp remembers what we try to forget, and somewhere, deep in its churning tides, a shadow world mourns the fall of its sibling, waiting for a name to be spoken again, for a signal to rise, for the silence to be broken. And when that happens, it won't return with fanfare, it will return with revelation, and all who dreamed it will finally understand. They weren't dreaming at all, they were remembering. In a galaxy so utterly broken, the idea of rediscovery is not a beacon, it is a trigger. If the Second Terra were ever found, it would not be a triumphant unearthing, but the opening of a crypt that should have stayed sealed. And yet, like all forgotten things that linger on the edge of oblivion, its rediscovery may not be a matter of if, but who. The pieces are moving, the secrets are thinning, and across the stars, certain forces are converging, knowingly or not, toward the shadow hidden in the halo zone. The first and most likely to find it may be the Necrons. Their silent expansion through ancient tomb networks often skirts the edges of the galaxy, operating in the same dark spaces the Imperium abandoned long ago. Unlike most Xenos, they do not need light or warmth. Their technology is undeterred by stellar absence, and their memory of the galaxy's shape, of forgotten voids and stellar shadows, is unmatched. If the Second Terra rests in the Halo Zone, then the Necrons may have already walked its surface and deemed it beneath notice, or perhaps too dangerous to awaken. But what if one of their overlords, seeking forbidden power or understanding of the monolith's own psychic distortions, returns to it? What would an immortal think of a human mimicry of empire, built in silence? Then there are the Tyranids. At first glance, they are the least likely threat, creatures of instinct, not ideology. But their hive minds are drawn to psychic anomalies. They devour not just biomass, but warp resonance. A world with psychic vaults, with echoes of the Emperor's power, would sing to them like a dying star. Worse, the Second Terra may not be able to hide from them. While the warp recoils from the Halo Zone, the hive mind does not. It moves through the void, uncaring of reality's constraints. A tendril, a splinter fleet, even a scout organism could brush too close, and then the silence would end in teeth. The Black Legion or other chaos forces may be drawn not by coordinates, but by prophecy. The ruinous powers whisper of mirrors, of twins, of thrones behind veils. Some word-bearers believe the Second Terra is a false heaven, a lie the Emperor built to cheat the gods. Abaddon, always seeking symbolic victories, might consider the destruction or corruption of such a place to be more meaningful than 1,000 burning worlds. If he were to uncover even a fraction of the truth, a map fragment, a psychic echo, a recovered astropath's memory, he would march upon it not with conquest in mind, but desecration. Because to destroy the Second Terra would be to destroy hope itself. And what of Guilliman, the avenging son, burdened now not just with war, but with the soul of a crumbling empire? He knows more than he admits. His time in stasis, his communion with the Emperor, his encounters with long-hidden truths have left him shaken. If anyone has seen the coordinates buried in forbidden scrolls, it is him. But would he seek the Second Terra? Perhaps not to rule from it, but to study it, to understand what the Emperor once feared so greatly, he created an entire planet to replace himself. There is a theory that Guilliman is already seeking it. His crusades have skirted sectors close to the Halo Zone. His requests for ancient data for deep-vaulted Mechanicus archives are too precise to be random. If he finds it, what will he do? Claim it, hide it, or perhaps destroy it, knowing that the Imperium cannot survive knowledge of its own contingency. And then, of course, there are others. The rogue inquisitors, the heretic cults, the explorers who have seen too much, those who have found fragments of old maps, who dream of cities without stars, who believe the Emperor is not dead, but waiting in a mirror. They operate on the edge, hunted and shunned, but sometimes madness is just truth filtered through too much time. Each of these factions, for reasons of conquest or survival, may stumble upon the Second Terra, and each represents a different fate for the world. The Necrons might preserve it, catalog it. The Tyranids would devour it. Chaos would corrupt it. Guilliman might entomb it again. The Inquisition would silence all who saw it. No fate is kind, no discovery pure. And perhaps this was the point all along. The Second Terra was never meant to be used. It was meant to be possible, a silent promise buried in the dark. A last whisper of design in a galaxy ruled by madness. Those who find it may not understand it. They may not survive it. But in that moment of rediscovery, the myth becomes real. And when myths become real, reality bleeds. If the Second Terra is found, it will not be salvation. It will be revelation. And the Imperium, already cracking, will have to look into a mirror it was never meant to face. There is a terrible wisdom in designing something never meant to be touched. For all the speculation and hope tangled in the myth of the Second Terra, one truth is more chilling than all others. It may be protected not just from outside discovery, but from its own activation. Fail-safes, doomsday protocols, precautions so absolute they transcend ethics, reason, and perhaps even reality. Because if the Second Terra awakens, it can only mean one thing. Terra has fallen. And if Terra has fallen, then nothing in the galaxy is sacred anymore. It begins with logic. The Imperium is not a hopeful thing. It is a paranoid, corpse-stitched machine driven by fear and survival. Every contingency it builds carries within it the seed of annihilation, because it assumes the worst will happen. So, if the Second Terra was truly constructed, it would have been layered not only with systems of continuity, but with kill switches, wards, and judgment engines. Things designed to judge the context of their own activation, and to respond not with warmth, but with scrutiny, suspicion, and, if necessary, wrath. Imagine the world waking, not like a man roused from sleep, but like a fortress unsealing after millennia, atmospheric regulators engaging, artificial light blooming in the false sky, systems long dormant running self-diagnostics, data vaults decrypting. But before any living thing is released, the world begins its judgment cycle. Who woke it? Why? From where? Are they of Terra? Do they bear the signs of legitimacy? Genetic, psychic, linguistic, philosophical? If they do not, the Second Terra may not welcome them. It may purge them. There could be entire systems built for this purpose. Defense mechanisms not just of metal and plasma, but of cognition and reality itself. Psych-out fields that fracture warp connections. AI not in the standard sense, but ancient minds, manifold intelligences, designed to test the moral and ideological purity of those who arrive. Fail, and the system may collapse upon itself, burying the world in antimatter or void fire, reducing all to dust rather than risk corruption. Some whisper of the final sigil, a theoretical protocol said to activate only if both Terra and the Second Terra are compromised. It would send a psychic scream across the galaxy, a death note that would erase data vaults, shatter astropathic networks, and unleash auto-exterminatus on thousands of backup worlds. Better nothing than a broken Imperium ruled by usurpers. But what if it is not destruction that awaits, but something far more sinister? Transformation. A world that has been learning, evolving, adapting in its silence. Systems designed to re-educate the inheritors of mankind, reshape them into the Emperor's true vision. Perhaps it is not a throne world, but a crucible. a place to rebuild humanity from the ground up without the flaws of the ecclesiarchy, the corruption of the High Lords, or the madness of the warp. Perhaps the Second Terra was never meant to restore the Imperium, but to replace it. There could be factories on that world, dormant for millennia, waiting to create a new kind of man, stronger, smarter, without faith, without fear, programmed from childhood with knowledge of the Emperor not as a god, but as a principle. A generation raised in total silence, complete obedience, designed to carry forward a reborn Imperium that has no need for the old one. To those born of Terra, it would be heresy. But to the Emperor's original dream, it might be the only salvation. And what of the Emperor himself? Could a shard of him dwell there? A psychic echo sealed in stasis, too dangerous to awaken unless absolutely necessary. What happens if it wakes and it does not recognize what the Imperium has become? What if it judges us unworthy? Would it bless us or annihilate us? Or, the fail-safes are not simply machines. They are ideologies encoded into systems, doctrines embedded into architecture. They are memory traps, soul filters, logic bombs designed to prevent not just physical invasion, but conceptual contamination. If the Second Terra awakens, it might decide that humanity is no longer worth saving, that it must begin again, from seed, from code, from silence. This is the true terror. That the world hidden in the Halo Zone is not a haven, but a test. That its awakening is not the end of disaster, but the beginning of judgment. It does not call for us. It waits to weigh us. And in its perfect silence, it prepares not to serve, but to decide. Because if the Second Terra ever opens its eyes, it will look upon a galaxy of fire and madness and ask only one question. Are we still human enough to survive what comes next? And its answer may be final. If the Second Terra exists, it is not merely a secret. It is a contradiction. A world built to save humanity that could, in the end, redefine what humanity is. In the vast tapestry of the Imperium, few myths threaten its structure more profoundly than the idea that a mirror to Terra lies hidden in the dark. Because if such a world lives, if it watches and waits, then everything we think we know about the Emperor, about mankind, about destiny, must be questioned. The Imperium is founded on the singular sanctity of Terra. Every prayer, every edict, every decree from the High Lords derives its power from the belief that Terra is not just the seat of the Imperium, it is its soul. It is Earth, the cradle of humanity, the source of the Emperor's light. To suggest there is another, equally prepared, equally sacred, is to fracture the myth at its core. It is not blasphemy, it is revolution. And yet, if the Second Terra does exist, it reveals a deeper truth, that the Emperor planned for failure, that he, in his absolute foresight, understood that symbols can die, that planets can burn, that even gods can be forgotten. And in that understanding, he did something no god would do. He made a backup. What does that mean for us? For the millions who die in his name every day? For the administratum that bleeds itself dry enforcing laws based on a single center of power? It means we are not living in the original dream. We are living in a holding pattern, a temporary phase, waiting for a signal that may never come. But that's not the horror. The horror is that the Second Terra might be better. Imagine a world without the scars of 10,000 years of war, without the corruption of noble houses, the weight of ecclesiastical dogma, the decay of bureaucratic insanity. A world where the Emperor's dream is still pure, still focused, still alive. Not through worship, but through function. A world where knowledge wasn't lost, where science wasn't heresy, where the light of reason was never extinguished. Such a world wouldn't just be different, it would be superior. And that is what the Imperium cannot allow. Because the Second Terra doesn't just threaten to replace Terra, it threatens to reveal it as a failure. In the hands of Guilliman, it could become a foundation for renewal, a core around which to build a saner Imperium, one not bound to relics and rotting dogma. In the hands of Chaos, it could be twisted into a mockery, a weapon of desecration. In the hands of the Mechanicus, it could become a shrine to forgotten technology, torn apart and studied until nothing sacred remains. But in its own hands, in the hands of whatever machines, guardians, or systems still preserve it, it may act alone. It may not want to be found. Or worse, it may be waiting for a signal that says, begin again. Start over. Rebuild humanity from this point, using these files, these memories, these codes. And in that act, everything we are would become a draft version, a corrupted lineage, a failed prototype. That is the unbearable idea, that we are the shadow and it is the light. And yet, perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the Second Terra is not there to replace us. Perhaps it is there to remind us that we were once something more, that we dreamed not of survival, but of greatness. That before we built cathedrals to a dying god, we built starships with purpose and poetry. So let the myth endure, let the whispers persist, let the navigators dream their impossible dreams, and the astropaths feel the cold echo in their bones. Because in those myths, we remember a truth the Imperium forgot, that we are not meant merely to endure, but to evolve. And if one day the silence of the Halo Zone breaks, and the Second Terra rises from the dark, may we not tremble. May we look into its mirror, see ourselves not as we are, but as we were meant to be, and become again. If this journey through mystery and theory stirred your imagination, subscribe to the channel for more Warhammer lore twisted through the lens of myth, emotion, and madness. The galaxy is vast, and its secrets are far from silent.